Hello everyone, this is Melanie from Melanie B's Creative Studio, and today I have something that looks a little familiar maybe, but not exactly like one video that I brought you before. So today I'm going to be working on a paint by number, but we're going to be coloring by number. And we're going to use the Hippie Crafter acrylic paint markers. I was sent these. They are so much better than some of the others I've tried. As you've seen me test some in prior videos, I was so much happier with the opacity of these and a couple of features, and so I wanted to bring these to you. Now, what I have in front of me is the swatch for the acrylic markers, and you can see that there's a beautiful range of colors. They're bright, they're pigmented, they are for the most part opaque. I'm going to go through this in a minute and we're going to talk about that. And to the left, what a paint by number enthusiast would consider to be a swatching nightmare, and its corresponding canvas underneath, which is also a paint by number nightmare, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. We're going to talk about the markers for just a second. I'm going to go through a few of the features, and then we're going to move on to how I want to use them today. So you can see the beautiful range of colors, and they are right up my alley. And there are 25 colors, as I mentioned. 2 of those are metallics, which never hurt to have in your stash. So we have a silver and a gold, and I have swatched those, and they are fabulous and beautiful and shimmery, and you know, gotta have those. So those are a nice touch, and especially if you don't use your acrylic markers simply for paint by numbers. So most people aren't using them for paint by numbers, they're using them for rock art, for multiple uses. You know, most of the time people aren't considering using them for paint by numbers, but I wanted to incorporate them into our paint by number art because, as I've done with oil paint markers before, I wanted to show you that you can color by number and not just paint by number, but you're still using paints. And that is what we're going to do, or start doing, with this particular painting that is under the markers. So before I get started, I will show you the tip that comes with the marker, and you're going to notice that it has a bullet tip inside already. Now it also comes with a replaceable tip that is a chisel tip. Now me being me, I have pulled the bag of tips out, their nibs, and set them aside. And those are chisel tips. And the chisel tips are the ones that are kind of at a diagonal, which is perfect for getting into places that need like a straight line. So I do not know what I've done with mine because I'm going to need them in certain areas. I would probably prefer to paint or color a paint by number with the chisel tip in. So if you're going to use these markers to paint a paint by number, I recommend that you go ahead and you replace the tip from the beginning with the chisel tip. So the easiest way to do that is to take a pair of tweezers, or if you haven't primed the tip of your marker yet, you can easily pull out the bullet tip, push in the chisel tip, and it's as easy as that. Then you want to prime your marker. Now when you're going to prime your marker, you're going to shake it up for a minimum of 10 seconds, and then you're going to push the tip in until you start seeing the paint come down into the point, and that's how you know you've got it ready to roll. I've done that for all of these markers because I wanted to swatch them, and so that's how I got my beautiful palette here. So it's not much different than priming the oil paint markers that I've shown you before. The difference with these are that we're not going to have to use special tools for cleanup and things like that. We don't have to have alcohol. We don't have to have anything but water. There's not going to be any difference between regular acrylic paint and what we have inside these markers. So the beauty of it is less mess, less cleanup, and that kind of thing. Now you're also probably a little more familiar with mixing when it comes to the acrylic paint, whereas in the previous video I did with the oil paint, you may not have, had the same kind of experience blending and mixing like I did in that first video. So that's another perk to having the acrylic markers versus an oil. We're going to be delving into that too as we go along. So the best part about these are they are vibrant and they have nice opacity. And they also have that beautiful satin finish on them that I love so much with other paint companies like Shipper and some of the other higher quality companies that we buy from. So I love that. I'm going to move these out of the way and we're going to discuss the painting that I have under here and why I'm going to use this particular painting to replace with these beautiful markers. So let me do that real quick and I'll be right back. So before I jump in and we talk about the swatching and the rest of this piece, let me go ahead and tell you a few more features that I loved about this particular set of the acrylic markers. The first thing was that they are quick to dry. And for those of us who paint with acrylic markers, we love that aspect of acrylic painting. That was one of the differences, and the oil paint that I had to get used to was not putting my hand back over the artwork as I was working on that little mini canvas. That is definitely something that appeals to me with these. These are non-toxic, they're fade resistant, and they're water-based, which is always nice because like I mentioned earlier, the cleanup is totally different. There's not gonna be the same kind of mess if you do have to mix or blend or any of that. So if you're using a palette, as we will be getting soon at Melanie B's Creative Supplies, hint, hint, and those will clean up with ease, just, water and wipe right off. The other thing is these can be used indoor and outdoor, and I'm going to give you a few ideas about what surfaces you can use these on, even though today we're going to use it on canvas. So you can use it on canvas, paper, glass, ceramic, wood, rocks, metal, plastic, rubber, fabric, and more. So you're not just limited to what I'm going to show you today, but there are other options as well. Now we're going to talk about why I'm replacing the paints in this particular painting with these markers. So I found this painting. I'm going to insert a photo here of what this looks like. And you can see it's very eclectic, very abstract. There's really no image to it. And I got it off Amazon. And there was no particular company or whatever. I mean, I'll put the information below. But I spent like $7 on it. And I didn't have really any expectations. But when it came in a box about this big, I immediately was like, damn it. I didn't even consider the fact that it was probably going to come in folded. So that was like poo-poo number one. And I thought, okay, well, fine, whatever. I'm going to have to tape mount it, which is what I'm going to be doing here in a minute, because you can see that it's going to have to be tape mounted. And so I'm not going to stretch this piece. I'm not going to go to all that trouble of putting it on a stretcher bar, but you can see the lines. And a lot of people would say, why don't you just iron it? I'm sorry. Excuse me, what? I don't iron clothes. I'm definitely not ironing my paint by number canvases. Let's not talk crazy. And yeah, no. So I have just as much luck usually when I tape mount or I stretch my canvases, and I don't have to go really to as much trouble. Now, a lot of times I'm going to be putting clear gesso on it, and that helps with the stretching process. The difference with this piece is I'm not going to be putting clear gesso on it because I don't want to affect the nibs of my markers. And that is another reason I wanted to start with a fresh canvas and not one that I had already prepped to be painted. Now, I do want to talk about this kit for just a minute. Here is its photo reference that came with it. You know the old saying, you get what you pay for? Nothing could be truer. So the canvas is actually not like a bad thing. I mean, it's shaded, it's clear, I can see the numbers and everything. So, you know, in and of itself, that is not necessarily a bad thing. It being folded, okay, I could fix that problem. No issue, right? The little tiny thumbnail photo, that's okay. I can resolve that issue because I save the picture on my phone and I can enlarge it and whatever, and it's just for reference anyway, right? Okay, no problem. It did come with a reference guide, and I was like, oh, nice. There you go, I'm good with that. But when I swatched the freaking paints, one was totally dried up like rubber. So I had to get my paintbrush wet just to get enough to swatch the color. Poo-poo! Because look at this. 12 out of 23 are transparent or translucent. Number one, I can't tell it is translucent, but it might be because it was a watery rubber paint. When I say watery, I mean it was just rubber paint that I had to water down. So I don't know if that one would have actually been opaque or not. So my point is this. It just happened to be that the paint sucked, so it ended up being a perfect example for me to work on. The good news is the color palette is very similar. So yay! So what that means is going to pick the colors that are similar to the paint. Going to find a replacement with a marker. Now, what I did do when I was swatching is I put a little label on the bottom and I gave it a number. So this one is HC18 purple. So when I was on my swatch, number 18 is this purple. So when I come over here, and if I had, of course I picked one that's not going to be replaced, but let's say over here, I need to replace this number 3. I'm going to say, oh, look at number 16. That's beautiful. So I'm going to come over here to number 16 and I'm going to pull it out. Here is number HC, number 16 is going to be my replacement for number 3. So I'm just going to say HC16. And that's going to be my replacement. It's a direct replacement. I don't care if the color is exactly the same or not. There's a very little subtle difference between those two colors. Who gives? Nobody's going to know that. This one's a little bit darker. The original is a little darker than that one. So I'll put down 2 layers. I'm okay with that. Not a big deal, y'all. Who gonna know, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and choose a color to replace the original palette. If I get to ones that don't have a direct replacement, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna make a replacement like we did in a prior video. So that's what I'm gonna be doing now. But first I'm gonna go ahead and tape mount this piece to this backboard, and I'll fast forward that. I'm gonna go ahead and do it while I'm on the camera so that you guys can have a quick reminder of how to do that process. And I will also link you to the videos in the description for stretching your canvas and tape mounting it, and the other video that I did, so you can see it there as well, and kind of the walkthrough and talk through of those things. And let me go ahead and get started. This now looks smoother and pretty close to perfect. Now, if I were to gesso this, it would be 100% perfect. I wouldn't have to do anything else to it. There's no ironing involved, blah, blah, blah. That is it. Okay, so let me explain what I have done here. Some of these colors I'm able to just directly replace with a marker. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the ones that I'm using for replacement. So I'm gonna start with just a small amount of the batch to begin with. These are gonna make up the first 12 numbers. And I'm gonna work on some of these in this area if I can find them. And those are the ones that we're going to play with. When we get to the colors we need to mix, I'm going to show you how we're going to mix those. And that way you can do a project like this using these markers and finish one on your own. This one is number 7 here, and I've labeled it on the back, HC7, and it's going to be my replacement for this very transparent number 4 over here. And as you can see, I have the chisel tip in here, and that's what I'm going to use to go in and start filling in this cell. Now I am standing back about 18 inches to 2 feet. So if I'm not meticulous on edges and things like that, you guys just pardon me, because I'm far enough back to not really be able to get in, you know, super close on lines and things. But what you'll see is I'm going to take the chisel tip backward, and I'm going to use the fine line to kind of outline around any detail areas. And you see how easy that is. And that's why I was saying that when you get your set, if you're going to use it for a paint by number, it's a good thing to change out the nib before you prime. Now if you don't, it's not a big deal. Just take a pair of tweezers, and I use the plastic cheap tweezers, and pulled this one out and replaced it. But look how beautiful the coverage is for these markers. And I haven't really found any of the acrylic markers that are like this. And if I feel like that my paint pen or my marker is starting to dry out at all, which it doesn't, prime it over here. It's some really good flow. Oh yeah, see the difference? I don't think I primed it enough before I started, and that makes the, oh, that makes the biggest difference. These have beautiful consistency. And they're dreamy to work with. And you notice I'm coloring in one direction just like I paint, which is funny because I don't like that whole back and forth feeling. I don't know why. When I color, I do the back and forth. I don't know why I'm doing it with this, but I like the consistency of the strokes going in the right direction. And that's just part of me being, you know, me. But see how quickly that filled in? Oh my gosh. And I totally went over the lines there because I can't see, but it's okay. It's just paint. Once it dries, I can cover it right up. I never worried too much about that. Now, I feel like I need to prime my paint again, but there's already a little puddle. So I'm just gonna dip into it over here and get that on there. So I'm gonna let this dry, and I'm gonna come back after it's dried, and we're gonna look at the coverage, because with the glare from the lights, you cannot see how well that yellow covered, and from what I'm seeing, it is fabulous. What I've decided to do is, while this is drying, I've decided to go ahead and mix number 1 and keep HC15 for number 14. So I'm gonna leave the original color for number 14, and I'm gonna mix the lighter color for number 1. So let me tell you what I've got in front of me. And I've got one of these little appetizer plates that I use that are disposable. With acrylic paint, these can be rinsed and reused. Soon I'll have the stainless steel palettes that I mentioned in the beginning, and I can't wait for those to come in. They are going to be amazing because you can rinse them and reuse them, and they're only about a 4x6 inch size, and you can hold them in your hand. In front of me, I have a new water cup that is now available also. In addition, I'm going to be using a few of the Melanie B's custom paintbrushes today. They're all in and available. And I want a really substantial puddle. And I want more of the blue than I want of the white, because the white is just going to be needed to tint that color. I'm going to decide which paintbrush I'm going to use based on the size of the opening right here. So I don't need a huge paintbrush. I'm going to use a flat brush. So I'm going to pull one of my new flat brushes. This is the mini flat size 0. It is in the flat brush set. There's a 5-piece set, and I really love them, of course. I'm obsessed with all the ones in the flat brush set. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse it to make sure any conditioning agent that was on it is off. You can just use a plain paper towel just to take off any excess water. And then I'm just going to mix. I'm gonna add a little bit more white. And let me go in here and try to get close. It's going to be hard for me to see what I'm doing because I'm so far back. So I'm going to just color a little bit with these markers and fill in some of the spaces that just need plain color. If I get to a mix that I need to show you, then I'll stop and I'll do a little mixing and fill that spot in. But otherwise, I think I'll just play a little bit and show you how easy it is to color by number with acrylic markers. So I'm gathering a few supplies and I'm letting that dry for just a minute. And I grabbed my flat brush set. And I'm gonna use these in addition to the mini detail set that I also have designed. And I'm gonna fill in some of these smaller areas just by dipping into the paint, the black paint that I have put on the little disposable palette. That way I can get into some of the smaller areas that I couldn't get into with the tip. I didn't want to switch out the chisel tip with this particular color because there are so many perfectly just round dots that the bullet tip worked so well for that I wanted to leave that bullet tip in there. So that's why you don't see me switching it out. And I just want to tell you guys, these colors are just, the paints are just so fluid and beautiful. I've never had acrylic paint markers or pens, whatever you would like to call these, that were just so beautiful and perfect. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm grabbing the brushes and I've got a couple of water cups over here. These are also new at the online store, and I will link you to all of the tools that I've got, and the cosmetic wipes for keeping my brushes in great shape. And I have instructions on other videos about how I use these items to keep the brushes, you know, perfect as I work. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm not gonna do a talk through, but I will post text about which brushes I'm using as I'm going so that you'll know which ones I'm using where as I work. Okay, so let's get back to painting. Okay, so I'm gonna take a break for just a second. I'm gonna explain something. It is nearly impossible for me to be perfect when I am far enough back because my vision is so bad. With glasses on, I cannot see up close, and with them off, I cannot see from a certain distance. So unless my face is right up in this camera, I'm not I can't be perfect. So I did, go out of lines and things more that I would feel comfortable with. And this is very fluid paint. You guys, it is beautiful. It's like a shipper paint. It's almost like an ink. But it is fabulous. And you guys know how much I love that consistency. So you just have to be very careful with it. Get a tiny bit on your brush if you're gonna use it with a brush like I'm doing. And it is magnificent. I'm loving it. I would be a little more careful with it if I was working on this, in a different setting. But it's amazing. I just want you to know that I'm a lot more of a perfectionist when I'm working, doing my own thing. But I can always go back. The 14s I'm not worried about because I haven't filled them in yet, but I went over a little bit on my yellow. So once this dries, I'm not concerned. I will touch it up with the yellow. So I'm not worried about that at all. But you guys, vibrant, beautiful. I love this contrast. This is gonna be a fun piece when it's done. And I'm telling you, I'm enjoying this process. I'm loving working with the markers. You know, one thing I loved about Paint by Numbers was the brush and the painting and all of that. But this is kind of like a combination of things. Kind of that nostalgic going back to your younger days where you're coloring, but at the same time you get that adult feeling of painting something. So with this, you get to do both because you're filling in some of it with the paint marker, but then you also get to grab your brushes and fill in with the brushes as well when you do it like I'm doing it. But there's some kind of amazing satisfaction doing it this way. And I'm enjoying this so much. I can't even, I mean, I guess you can probably hear it in my voice. So I am thrilled that Erin reached out to me and allowed me to try these markers. So I'm hoping, and I always say this, like, I am so thrilled with the palette that she has. I would love to see her come out with, another range of colors, because I would get every single marker that she has and keep them in my stash because they're incredible. They would be amazing as backup colors, if not just to do an entire painting like I'm doing right now. I would love to have them as just on hand for when I have horrible paints, I can replace with, but also to do a painting just like I'm doing because it's so enjoyable. So I'm gonna keep working, and I just wanted to stop and tell you that. So I think what I'm gonna do is go ahead and do 2 color mixing to show you how you can create a custom color. If you only have the 25 colors, what would you do, right? So we're gonna mix that color. And then I will work on this piece off camera and come back and show you how these markers looked and filling this in, because I feel like this is one of those pieces I'd love to just sit and work on and enjoy, on my own, and then come back and show you the progress, because this is just a lot of fun to work on. So what I came up with to create number 22 is HC5, which is, what I've called this. So let me pull my swatch. I looked at number 22, like I said, which is this very rusty red, deep red. And I said, what colors would it take to create that? Well, I know it's gonna be a red, obviously, and it has some orange in it, but it looks like it's got some black because it's a darker shade. So when you have a darker shade, a shade means black. So we're gonna add a little black. It may not need much black. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna do a little red, and then I'm gonna add a touch of either black or this dark gray and see where I am with it. Then if I feel like it needs a little orange, I can add some orange, but we're gonna just start doing it with the black and the red and go from there. H5 is this color, and then of course we're gonna have black, and then I'm gonna pull the darker gray just in case, and then we're gonna pull the orange and just see what we need to do to mix these. I'm gonna go ahead and shake them up, and I'm gonna prime on here so that if anything comes out, I will have that puddle that I need to mix with. I'm gonna take my larger flat brush. This is the size 2, and I'm gonna take a little bit of this gray. I mean, that's very little. And let's start mixing. Let's test. I think it's gonna need a little bit of darkness, but I'll put it here. And you see I'm pretty doggone close to what I need. We'll let that dry for a minute, but I'm gonna add a touch of black. Make sure. Ooh, that's gonna be a lot of black. Okay, see how much that is? Let's see if I can get in here. That might be too much, but this is a good way to show you. See how dark that is and how it darkened it up so much with that little bit of black? That's okay. because that's a good way for me to teach you why too much black is too much, right? So let me put that here and let that one dry. But you can see, you know, that was just a little too much. Now, I still feel like I'm gonna need a little orange in that, and I'm gonna put more red just to offset that extra black. I'm also gonna clean my brush. All right, so I'm gonna add more red to my palette here. And I don't wanna go straight in there because I don't wanna contaminate the tip of this beautiful red. But let's put a puddle here. And let's go in with the orange. There we go. Now let's mix some of this in, lighten that up, get a little orange going in here, and let's see what we have now. Now, what you would do to have enough to paint with is you would put out bigger puddles and play with this until you get it exactly what you need. Because obviously, you know, you're looking at it going, well, you just used all of what you have and you don't have anything to paint with now. But it's only because I'm doing this for the test. And by George, I think we've got it. Let's get a little bit of that darkness right there. But now we have the recipe. So when I'm ready to paint this color, and I made a huge mess. That is the messiest swatch I think I've ever done in my life. That's gonna make my eye twitch. So when I'm ready to do this paint, to actually paint with that, what I would do is say that I used HC5, 4 parts of that, plus 1 part HC6, which is the orange, and then I have HC22 was, I think, enough to use without adding any black if we just used maybe a half part of that. And that would be my recipe. So when I make up a bigger batch, I know exactly what I need to create that color. All right, guys, so I'm gonna continue to work on this piece, and I'm going to come back at the end and show you the photos of the progress of using the markers and the mixes that I've shown you. And I hope you guys love this. I'm obsessed with these markers. They have a website of their own. They also sell on Amazon. I will have affiliate links for Amazon, so if you want to go purchase from those, that gives me a little tiny bit of commission, which is always nice, but you can always shop from their website as well, whichever one works best for you. And I just want to thank them for reaching out to me and for being patient while I went through the fiasco of waiting for this painting and getting it and having to go through the nightmare that it was to get it flat and everything. So appreciate that. Thank you guys as always for being here, and I will see you back soon.